because I just decided when I was your age, I wanted to do what no one else was willing to do, go where no one else was willing to go, pay the price no one else was willing to pay, putting in those extra couple miles when nobody's looking, or
Yeah.
doing the sprint workout whenever people want to bail out on it or fake it. Like you set the example for
Mhm.
others, and you're willing to face the crowd, because if you decide to like be above mediocrity, above like socially acceptable slacking, you're going to probably catch a lot of shit.
Adrian, how are you doing?
I'm good, Korey. Good to be with you, brother.
I know we were just talking about a little bit earlier, but I just kind of, in my place as being a young person in my generation, I kind of like for my audience to, since they're part of the older generation, I kind of want to see what did you kind of do when you were my age, and then how did you get to your career that you are in now?
Yeah, because you're young 20s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a stepson about your age. What did I do when I was your age? I was 20. I was a sophomore in college. It was a big shift for me. So I was like, went into college, went into undergrad, didn't know what I wanted to be. I was drawn towards the sciences, and was good at school and memorizing stuff and all that. So I was like going to go be a doctor potentially, but then I realized pretty early I'm not like these people, and I don't want to be like these people. And so I early kind of pivoted out of that, which was a big shift. It's like, I think
Hmm.
I was definitely one of those kids that I kind of did what was expected of me,
Hmm.
at least in the public. I mean, I had my own private life and was plenty devious, and we could get into those stories if you wanted, but plenty devious. But in my public life, I usually just kind of listened and saw what was needed and did that. And then I made this shift out of being a pre-med major in college. I went to a very small school in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, and I played football, and I was a nursing major, so always quite oxymoronic. But I moved into nursing, and I,
Hmm.
I did because I'd met a guy whose dad ran the ER in Gary, Indiana, so it was in the middle of some heat. And I thought, oh, that's
That's
cool.
kind of where I live.
Okay, that's cool. Where do you live?
I live in Munster, Indiana, so it's about
Munster.
five
I've been
ten
to
minutes.
Munster. What was the name of? There's like a petting zoo behind a bar, honky tonk, that I went to in Munster.
I don't know
E&L.
any of that. So.
Oh, well, I went. My roommate was from there, and I think
Hmm.
he might have actually lived in Munster. Anyway, when I went with him
Hmm.
back home, we went to this honky tonk bar, and behind the honky tonk bar, there was like a tiger in a cage. It was crazy. Anyway,
A real
must not
tiger?
be there. Yeah, real, alive. You must not be there anymore. You would definitely know about it, because it's pretty crazy. Like, you're in there line dancing, then you go in the back and you could feed a steak to a tiger. Pretty cool.
Jeez.
Anyway, yes, I started then deciding that life is really about, I wanted to do things that I love doing, not do things because 10 years from now it would pay off. I would
Hmm.
just want to actually do something that I love doing. And I liked, I actually, when I was doing it, it's not like I wanted to go be a nurse for my whole life. I just knew that I could make money, and I was good at it. And I could make money, and I had tons of versatility. And that was one of my first big, risks that I took. Now, you're asking like people from my generation. Most people in my generation, especially the generation right before mine, they did the smart thing, which is to kind of pick a path and, you know, work at a place for 10 years, and eventually you'll make it to leadership, and eventually.
Hmm.
Definitely some from my generation, like me, definitely the younger we get, the more people follow their instincts and follow their intuition, which I would
Yeah.
always suggest. Just because life's short. You and I might die this afternoon or this evening. We don't know. I remember hearing in college that 2/3 of people worked outside of what they majored in. That gave me a lot of liberation. I just thought, okay, I'll do that. I'll just, whatever. I'll go get a degree that I could do really well and do pretty easily. And then I'll just do that as long as I want to. And then I'll go do something else, which ended up becoming true for me, because I was a nurse in Chicago taking care of sick kids at a children's hospital in the intensive care unit. So kids were, on the brink of death and families were freaked out. I did that for a long while. I come from a faith background, so I was naturally involved in helping do community service type work and philanthropic type work, and also having deeper conversations about life and philosophy and ethics, and which I think all great spiritual communities promote that type of conversation. Not that much dogmatism, more lifestyle. I did that, and then I moved across the country. I moved to Los Angeles because I'd heard one guy give one speech, like a sermon, and I came back. I was on a trip to India, on a service trip to India. Heard this guy give a talk, and then I came back, read every book that he'd written, and then moved out to Los Angeles to come be a part of his community and find a way to make a difference. Was an intern here at this place called Mosaic here in Los Angeles, and so hard pivot, and really glad I did, because it just opened up a whole new world of relationships for me, whole new skill set. I ended up speaking from stage quite a bit, getting trained by some of the greatest leadership organizations in the world, traveling and speaking about leadership. And I really loved it, and got a lot out of it and built a big network. And, we were about 3,000 people. My job eventually was to mobilize as many people as possible. Usually about 2,000 people a year would go out and serve in the community. So I got to know the community. I just got entrenched. And why was that? Because I just decided when I was your age, I wanted to do what no one else was willing to do, go where no one else was willing to go, pay the price no one else was willing to pay. That paid off for me, because that helps you stand out. So I wasn't into finding my spot in the crowd. I wanted to go find my spot outside the crowd and call the crowd towards me. Not towards me like I'm special, but just towards what I was doing. Like
Yeah.
I was like serving, homeless kids and mentoring homeless kids. That's cooler than what most people are doing on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I positioned myself next to really great opportunity, people would be attracted to the opportunity. And I became the conduit for that. So did that for a long while. And then I helped a guy in his own faith journey whose father was a billionaire. So he was a millionaire. Long story really short, he wanted me to help him figure out what to do with his money. I started a foundation for him. We did leadership training work in prison with murderers. So we trained 30 of them, and then we trained the murderers how to be trainers like us.
How did that go out?
Say what?
How did that go?
Oh, it was amazing. I just did a training 2 weekends ago down here in LA. And one of the guys in the training, leadership training, was a guy that was a lifer. He was in prison, one of the initial guys we trained. And almost 100% of those guys had life with the possibility of parole, but they weren't being let out because of how they showed up and because they were criminals and acting like criminals and breaking the rules, that kind of stuff. But after they went through our training, I think every single one, but at least I'll say almost every single one, next time they got in front of the parole board, picture like Shawshank Redemption, where you stand in front of the tables and the people, and they all got out. And with our program, we've studied it over the years, the natural recidivism rate, they call it, which is the chances of someone coming back to prison after they get out. Average is 87 guys out of 100. Once they get out, they'll come back. After they go through our training, that number goes from 87 down to 12. So It was amazing. Breathtaking work. People coming out, like guys that started a gang. Like there's a guy named Preach that was his street name. They called him Preach. And he started one of the Crip gangs in Southwest Pasadena. So tough dude. Now he gets out. Now he works with the police to go do gang intervention. Like when a gang is about to light off on another gang, they'll call him. He'll go into the fight and stop the war. So that's the type of guys that ended up coming out of those programs. It was breathtaking. Mark Sutton's his name. He's a great dude. And from that work, I've been doing all this leadership transformation work. And so that's what got me into what I'm doing now. So I always followed, to answer your question, I always followed the opportunities. I didn't follow a plan. And, a lot of people like to make plans. That's fine. I'm just not that guy. I think if you follow a pre-decided plan, you'll end up not seeing all the possibilities that are right in front of you. I know that
Mm-hmm.
I just said this to somebody earlier, that for me, provision always happens through people, meaning that the next great opportunity is going to happen because of somebody I meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost always true. It's almost always true for me because I'm looking for it. So
Yeah.
if I meet somebody, I just have decided already that it's ordained, like I'm supposed to meet this person. And from that, they become a huge wealth of knowledge for me, a wealth of insight, wealth of opportunity. And my job is to go, as you say, start with curiosity, is get to
Mm-hmm.
know them and get to know what they're about and get to know what they're up to. And there might be, for most people, there's something they're doing that I can help them with, either I or someone I know. So like I am the sum total of my network. So if I've got somebody, this just happened, a conversation 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes before we got on. This guy was pitching me on some opportunities, and I just naturally think about who in my network should she be talking to instead of me. And it's like, oh, this guy, Chris, let me tell you about Chris, and I'm going to connect those two after this. So I am the subtotal of my network. So my job is to increase my network so that I've got more resources to share with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
If you shared any need with me right now, I know somebody that knows something about it, and if they're around me, they're good people, and they'll take a call with you just because they trust me and I trust them and I know you. So that
Yeah,
that
I
kind
think
of thing.
I think that's definitely important because especially what I like to do, and it's a lot what you say is that especially everyone that I'm meeting, whether it's at a store, whether it's I'm just saying hey, whether they come through where I'm working at, I think it's very important to make a relationship out of everything. And I think a lot what I do is when I'm meeting someone, I try to make a relationship just because you never know what it might lead to. And it
Right
might
on.
actually lead to a business relationship, whether or a love relationship. It might
Yeah.
lead to a lot of different things, and I definitely think that's very important for anybody
Yes,
to
sir.
know.
That is, man.
Um, and
That's
so is
rare.
this?
It's rare, by the way.
That's true, and that's why
It,
that's why when the guy told there was a guy specifically who told me, hey, just keep asking questions, and after that I'm like, hey, I have to keep asking questions, and that's what led me here, pretty much.
right on, man. That's cool. Yeah. What's your heart behind this podcast? What do you hope to get done with it?
Well, at first it's like you kind of see, do you really want money from this? And so I kind of asked myself the question, am I okay with not making money with this? And
Mm-hmm.
my thing is, yes, I definitely would be okay with not making money with this, and I would rather have genuine conversations with people who are interested in maybe the same things that I'm interested in, but also are very dedicated in what they do and are very
Mm-hmm.
interested in what they do. And so just having a meaningful conversation with people my at my generation and the people above for me to learn and for them to learn something new about the world, new about themselves, and for me to learn about somebody else pretty much. And kind of it's like the same thing that you were saying about like networking. It's a big thing and a lot for me to learn, so that's kind of
Right
why
on.
I'm starting this. So
It's brilliant, man. It's brilliant. I mean, the odds of you making money is slim, just based on the stats of how many
yeah.
podcasts there are. But you could be one of the guys, especially if you have a distinct niche, and how you show up and the way you ask questions, and
Hmm.
and reaching out to me is bold. Like, it was great to get the message from you asking me to join, and you're brand new, which is awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Most people, whatever the stats are, I'm going to make them up. Let's say there's a million podcasts in the world, something
Yeah.
like that. There's something like only 30% record more than like 3 episodes. So
I think it was actually a statistic about that where it's I don't know the actual number, but I know that not a lot of people make over 3 podcasts, and that
yeah,
if you make 20, if you make over 21, I think you'll be in the 1%. And so that kind of ratio, I think it's very important for me to just get the numbers out, make sure I'm
yes,
talking to people. Um,
yes.
and
And stay
just,
bold, man. Stay
yeah.
bold. You reached out to me randomly as a stranger, and I got your heart. I got your commitment, and so I was in. That's great.
Yeah. So for me, I think a leadership has been a big part of my life. And for me, when I'm talking to people and I hear leadership, I think everyone has a different definition. So like for me to you, I think, what do you consider a leader?
What do I consider a leader? Well, who do I consider a leader? A leader is anyone that's committed to getting results through other people. That's an easy definition. That leadership is getting results through others, and even better, like with others. It's not necessarily, I mean, I guess there's an aspect that it's positional. Like, you could make that argument. I wouldn't, but, do I have responsibility for other people's lives or other people's professions? But even if I don't have, this is like the good news for anybody starting out. You said you're 20, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're 20. So if I don't have positional authority, which you won't have, I mean, you do on this podcast, you're the boss here. I'll do whatever you say. But out there in the world, like if you had a job,
Hmm.
you wouldn't have positional authority, but it doesn't mean you don't have leadership opportunities, which is the ability to go persuade other people towards a goal. That's another way to look at leadership, because you could be a peer to like 6 people, even if you worked at like, I don't know anything about what you do, but let's say you worked at Starbucks and you had 6 peers. Well, no one's stopping you from acting like the leader of those 6. And to do that, you just have a clear vision for the future that you're committed to, and aiming at the vision for the organization, whatever that is, and a willingness to go listen to, connect with, motivate other people towards that goal. That makes you a leader. So, and then back to a core level, it's leadership always starts at the personal level, meaning me as a person. So we have a school of education in my company, an academy called the Academy for Effective Leadership, and we focus on 3 conversations. One is how to generate new results. That's what great leaders do, generate new results. Number 2 is how to align a team, recruit and align a team. That's complicated. But the biggest conversation is self-leadership, or we call it self-mastery. So everybody's responsible for leading themselves.
Do you think
Everybody.
do you think becoming a leader is kind of being born, or is it made? So can anybody become a leader, or is it just like only a defined few?
Well, in that definition that I just said, everybody's responsible for leading themselves. A lot of people don't, and they just live in this kind of Freudian view that I am the sum total of my history and my environment. I don't live that way, but that's pretty common in today's culture. But everybody can lead themselves. They really ought to. Otherwise, you're just going to like be the result of whoever you're around, or whatever's happening in culture, or in your family, or in your geography, something like that. But if you decide that you're greater than your circumstances, you're already a leader, at least leading yourself. And if
Hmm.
in a land full of zombies, anybody that's really alive, they're going to lead.
Why is it important to lead yourself?
Well, that's where the whole sense and experience of vitality comes from. Meaning, if I get the fact that at any single moment in time, I get to choose my perception, right? So X is like, for example, you and I are not on the same podcast. It seems like we are, because
Hmm.
we're on the same program. We're recording online right now, but we're not on the same podcast. Your brain is interpreting what's happening, even what I'm saying at this moment. Your brain's interpreting it. It's ascribing meaning to it. And then you're reacting to that meaning that you decided about what's happening. Like, do I like this guy? Do I not like this guy? Is he helpful? Do I need to lead him more? Can I let him
Hmm.
speak? Do I trust him? All these conversations they're really invisible decisions you're making about what's happening right now. Same thing over here. I'm in the conversation. I'm also interpreting it based on what I think and what I want and what I'm committed to, all that. I'm interpreting all that, and I'm on that podcast. But that's different than your podcast. You're on your own. So we're always in a unique perception about what's happening. Most people think we're not. Most people think we're on the same podcast. We're not. Number one. And number two is that out of that, I get to make a ton of choices. If I like the way it's going, I can double down. If I don't like the way it's going, I can assert myself and make a shift and invite you into, my vision for the time together. So why is it important? Because if I decide that, if I know, which is just gravity, neuroscience, gravity, that we all live in a perception. You know what I mean by perception?
Yeah. Well, can you explain that?
Sure. Perception is that I am always interpreting, like ascribing meaning to what's happening. Nothing is already baked, right? I can just decide what I think about you, what I think about this podcast, what I think about the conversation I want to have, what I'm thinking about me right now. I'm always deciding what that means. Some of those types of thoughts open up huge possibilities, and I'm really excited. I want to lean in and have a conversation. Some of those thoughts will shut down and like make me pull back and not want to invest myself or take a risk. That's always up for grabs. So perception is the decisions I'm always making about the meaning in current reality. So, like you, for example, when you came on this podcast today, we're supposed to do it earlier in the day. You had some technical stuff, so we ended up doing later in the day, which is great. There's something about it that was meaningful to you. That's why you decided to, even with the technical issues, you're going to persevere and jump on here. So that's it in real time, right? You decided that, you noticed that it's unconscious for us because it's so natural for us. But that's if I become conscious of what's unconscious, I already have a leg up on most humans, because most humans just there's a Carl Jung quote. I don't know if you know Carl Jung. He's a famous psychologist. He said, "Until we make the unconscious conscious, we will call it fate, and it will rule our lives."
I definitely
So
heard that quote before.
yeah, Carl Jung, Jung. Anybody's listening, listen to Carl Jung. He's one of the forefathers in psychology. He talked about the shadow self. Famously talked about the shadow self. Talks about the virtue in accepting and exploring our dark side, which most people don't do and won't do because of fear that they'll actually become it or it'll rule their lives or something like that. But my experience is, if I can see my dark side and not judge it, if I can hug the cactus, we call it, then I've got a leg up on most human beings, which is true. So back to your question. Perception, if I decide that I get to choose my interpretation of any moment in time, which we do, but if I can see that and start to do that actively, and then make choices based on my vision for the future, not based on current reality, just based on what I'm committed to. If I make decisions, why do that? That, which was your question, is therein lies a whole ton of vitality, of aliveness. When I say vitality, I just mean like, oh, wow, I'm excited to be here. Most people are more cynical or skeptical about life, and so they try to do the least amount possible and get away with it, which they do.
Yeah.
They just get a really crappy future.
That's also true.
Yep.
So I just want to talk about why, when it comes to team culture, and when we're especially in a workspace and in an environment where uh, we have a team, why do you think leadership is more important on a team versus without leadership? Because I feel that when you don't have, especially a leader who is taking place in a short team or a long-term team, you kind of get what I would call like slackers, or you wouldn't get a performance base. You wouldn't get people performing the best that they can
Sure.
without a leader. So why do you think leadership is important?
Yeah, well, first off, leadership's always happening. But whenever you're saying there's not leadership happening, that means poor leadership is happening. And even poor is like a moral term. It's not, there's just behavior that's happening that creates a future nobody wants. Big picture. So leadership's always happening. It's just, what's the quality of the leadership? And by that, I really mean like what future is opened up by the way that a leader is showing up. So if I'm on a team And I, I guess I'm wired this way a little bit because one of the early pet peeves in my life or challenges or frustrations was when like there's a group of people together and nobody knows what's happening. That would always bug me. I don't know why it always bugged me, but I would always notice those moments and it would bug me. And so from that, I just decided I was going to be the guy that stood up and helped. Even if I didn't know what I was doing, I was going to act like I did and pull people together and call a play, whatever the play was. Either if it's like, on the playground, we got 25 minutes. What are we going to do? We're going to play basketball. Okay, good. You're the captain and I'm a captain and let's go. Pick, go. You go first. You pick, I'll pick, and let's go. Let's play ball. I found that like being in action is a lot more satisfying than waiting for someone else to tell you what to do. For me, some people don't want that. They don't want the pressure that comes with that or the responsibility that comes with that. I understand. I'm not that guy, but you ought to, if you're not prone to leading, that's okay. Be prone to following really well. Like I don't need to be in charge. I don't actually love it if I'm with somebody that's very competent. I can be a really great lieutenant, like a second in command, but I'm going to probably play one of those roles. I'm either going to be leading or I'm going to be the best follower this person's ever had. So I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to bring this person, information about what's happening. Probably do some research, learn some stuff, so I can inform the conversation, the decisions. And if I'm around people that don't want me to fully participate, whether in leading or following really closely, then I'm going to get out of that environment just because life's short. And I know that utilizing 100% of my presence, which involves like my head and my heart, my soul, all that, that's what I'm committed to no matter what. I mean, even if I'm walking around the, Walmart or Target or something, I'm going to like befriend people and we're going to get to know people. And we're even just strangers. We were talking about this before we got on. Like everybody starts as a stranger.
Yeah.
But it just takes one person to make a smile, to say hello, how's your day going, crack a joke. And all of a sudden you're beyond strangers right away and you don't ever go back. Once you break that seal, you never go back. So, that's what I think about that.
I definitely like how you said that, especially as a team, that you're okay with being the lieutenant, being the second hand man. And I think I kind of see that a lot in me, especially when it comes with working jobs or just so I do run a lot.
Yeah.
I'm part of a track team for Indiana Tech, and a lot of
Cool.
what I do is I could be a leader in a lot of those positions, but I like for somebody else to lead so that I can be able to be the best follower as possible. And just because that I kind of see myself being a great leader doesn't mean I have to be a leader at all the
No.
times. And so I think a lot of people don't like to follow. So why is it important to have a great follower after the leader?
Okay. Why is it important to have a great follower after the leader? Well, the purpose of a great follower is they connect the leader, which is out front. A leader's always out front, looking into the future. A great follower, like I think we're describing, is going to connect the leader to the mass of people. So that's part of the purpose of it. And I think the virtue in it is like if I am a great follower, or if I have one, if I'm leading, that's gold to me because it's a lifeline back to the group think and what's happening there. And I'll be connected to the conversations that are probably not going to get to me because I'm the leader and they don't want to tell me the truth, or there's like natural tendencies in human beings to put on a good face and not have a real conversation. So
Yeah.
if I've got a special relationship with a lieutenant or great followers, we're calling them, they're going to shoot me straight. And we have a special bond. If I'm the leader. If I am the lieutenant, I've got access to the group that the leader doesn't because they're trying to like put on a good face, that kind of thing. That's one way it could be. But if I'm like you, man, I like if I'm in a group, I'm cool with like being exemplary among the mass. That would be one way you could say it. But it takes some guts to do that, and people will always follow courage. even if like the leader isn't the most qualified, the most
Hmm.
courageous is the one that gets the attention.
Yeah.
So, and that might be as simple as putting in a few. I mean, what's your event and track?
I do long distance.
Wow. Okay, good. So putting in those extra couple miles when nobody's looking, or
Yeah.
doing the sprint workout whenever people want to bail out on it or fake it. Like you set the example for
Hmm.
others, and you're willing to face the crowd, because if you decide to like be above mediocrity, above like socially acceptable slacking, you're going to probably catch a lot of shit,
Yeah.
because people love for the standard to be low so they don't feel convicted by the standard. But if you're willing to raise the standard and put in the extra laps, show up a little bit early, stay a little bit later, clean up afterwards, um, go around, take care of people, check in with people, how they're really doing, you will threaten the norm. And that's a good thing, especially in your phase of life when you're 20. I would threaten every norm you get close to, just to see where you are in relationship to the norm and see what's possible for you. I mean, my 20s are meant to be a time of experimentation, where you go out and try things you've never done before, because the
Hmm.
risk is so low. If you blow it, if you start a new business and it doesn't work, you start this podcast, let's just say it doesn't work, you learn something.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're in motion, and you're trying something and you're throwing yourself at it and you're reaching out to people like you did with me, that's already leaps and bounds above most of your classmates. They're just playing video games right now, but you're doing this.
I think I definitely it definitely hits me the most, just because that's really like real life there, and a lot of society, especially my age, that's what they're doing. They're playing video games. They're
Yep.
trying to fit in with the majority and not try to be in a pack of themselves. And
Yes.
so that's kind of a lot what I want to do is to create the different norm. You rarely see people with podcasts at my age. You kind of get a little more experience. You want to get a little bit older before you start it, and then by then it's in a way it's never too late, but in a way you could have done it earlier if you would have just done and not stick with the status quo.
Right
And
on, man.
I think it a lot of what I do is kind of challenge the status quo and kind of being on my own.
Yeah. Well, that's inspiring, man. I mean, I'm thinking about when I was 20. I was kind of like you in that way, that when I was a sophomore, I was running a residence hall. I had shift over. I was a nursing major, played football. I found as many student organizations that I could participate in and lead. And I spent all my time meeting with people, connecting with them, really learning how to listen and learning how to guide and advise people. And I didn't have any business doing that, in the sense that, like, it was just a volunteer. Like, I just decided that I was going to care about people more than people typically feel cared for. And I was going to set the bar really high for myself and others. And I was going to, what's the phrase I'm looking for? I was going to try to set that bar high and then lead by example, right? So be a man of action. Um, and I wanted to do both, and do both in this way. There are certain masculine traits, like what guys typically do, and there's certain feminine traits, what girls typically do, obviously, like stereotypically speaking. And I just wanted to cover as many of both categories as possible. So I played football, very masculine group of guys. And they
Hmm.
were like, in the frats, doing the thing, the typical party scene, treating women a specific, typical stereotypical way. I saw all that. And when I was your age, I would just experiment with doing the opposite. And same thing, there's certain female traits that worked. And I knew that, like, if I wanted to stand out among men, I needed to be able to connect across genders. So learning how to
What
speak
did
to
you
women.
do? Oh, speak
Well,
to women.
yeah, learning how to speak to women, learning how to understand, like, listen long. I mean, it's like women usually guys usually try to solve the problems of women, which comes off very, oh, um, degrading in some sense, but also just disconnected. So learning how to be vulnerable and sharing and like being in touch with my own emotions. I wasn't necessarily at your age very in touch with my own emotions. So like putting myself through a process of really listening to what's going on for me privately and being willing to talk about that, because when you do that as a man, women get close. And sometimes men are repelled by that because it's too much for them. They'll call you serious or deep or something like that. Those were stereotypes of mine that I felt early, and it's okay. I decided it took me far longer after 20, usually probably mid 30s, to realize I'm not for everyone. I actually have a t-shirt that says that now. I'm not for everyone, which is true. It's cool. Go be distinct, man. Like everybody wants to be somebody else, but if you just be yourself, fully expressed, you won't be for everyone, but you'll be for the right people. You'll build friendships that last.
So were you a person who had like a bunch of friends, or were you kind of like on your isolated?
I had a bunch of friends, but I had a bunch of friends in very different categories. That was kind of the thrill for me. So I had obviously my playing football in college. I had athletic friends, but then in different student organizations, I had tons of friends. I also befriended even the housekeepers that worked in the residence hall, or you know, um, leadership at the school. I would go to office hours for some of my professors just to get to know them. I wanted to be, generate friendship everywhere I went, like as a practice. I mean, being a friend is an activity. It's not just it's not a noun. It's like a friending would be like I guess a gerund phrase, but more like a verb. Like, how do I befriend people? That's like something you can do no matter where you are. If I walk down the street, there's somebody walking a dog right now, and I could just nod or something, or saying hi, or I could introduce myself and get to know them. I've got a couple little kids. I got a 10-year-old boy and an almost 8-year-old girl, and I'm always teaching them how to connect with people, because it's a lost art in society. I know that, from where I am approaching 44, or where you are 20, and even more to
Mhm.
them at the age of 10, we've got a phrase that I've adopted in my family: faces, not screens. Faces, not screens. So learning how to look people in the eye and shake somebody's hand and smile and say, hi, what's your name?
Why do
Like
you think
that.
that's a lost cause?
I don't think it's a lost cause. I think it's a cultural trend. And everything comes in pendulum swings. So right now, you know, with of course, the deep amount of people that are on their phones all the time, that are just locked in, um, that probably climaxed, I would say, maybe a year ago. With AI coming, and AI here, obviously, I think there's starting to become a shift back into analog, or into like simplifying life, because we feel like the world's taking off. And so no one's ever going to beat the human connection. It's the most primal thing about us, is we need people. Um, so yes, you could spend your time connecting with people online in some other country or something like that. But if you become really talented at making the people around you feel seen, heard, connected with, you're always going to be a leader, because the percentage of humans that are willing to do that instead of just follow technology is going down over time. So if you're one that says, "Hey, I'm going to become an expert at human connection," you're going to you're going to set yourself apart.
Did you always know that you were good at leadership, or was it like when you started to get into leadership as a business, did you kind of look back at your life and be like, there was so much that I knew about leadership, or I've done from leadership, that now I can be able to say that, hey, this is what I've done from with leadership.
Well, that's a great question. I Let's see. I kind of needed leadership when I was young, only in the sense that, like, from the outside, I kind of had it together, in the sense that, like, I was good at school, athletic, likable, all those types of things. But internally, I was pretty anxious. Most people wouldn't know that, because I was good at like looking normal, quote unquote, looking normal. But the willingness to lead, which I always was very willing to lead, that became a muscle that really served me just to really help my social anxiety. Like if I know that I'm willing at any moment in time to step up and raise my hand and lead a moment, that made me very, very versatile. So I was never bored. I'm still not a bored person. I'm rarely ever bored. I don't remember the last time I felt bored. Um, and no matter what's going on, even if I'm the new person, um, even a silly, common, example from life today. I coached my son's baseball team. After one of our practices on Wednesday, this softball team came and showed up. And I, used to play baseball all the time, and I've played slow pitch softball plenty. I just went over. I'm walking back to the car with the kids, and I said, "Hold on a second." I ran over to the dugout and I just asked, "Hey, who's the manager of this team?" And it was this guy, Joe. And he said, "Hey, Joe, do you ever need any players, like any substitute players?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Okay, great. I'll be one." Um, Fast forward 2 weeks later, I'm playing softball with that team. I don't know anybody, and I show up, and he doesn't have me on the field because I'm the random sub. That's
Yeah.
fine. After the first inning, I went up to him. I said, "Hey, Joe, I can help," because they made a ton of errors, and I'm pretty good at baseball. So he put me in, and now all of a sudden I go from being nobody to making tons of plays. Why? Because I appointed myself as a person that counted. I decided to raise my hand and said, "Count on me." And then I showed up and I made a difference. And now I'm this random dude that when I go out and play, I'm one of the best people on the squad. So I just decided to show up. And if you're willing to do that, then you're going to stand out from the crowd. Most people are unwilling to do that. So that ability, that willingness to stand up and be counted and take the pressure on myself to make a difference, that really helped me. And your question was about, did I always know that I was great at leadership? I didn't always know that, but I always wanted to find out how much meaning I could have, and meaning is always connected to the level of participation. So if you participate fully, you'll get a lot more meaning than if you sit back and wait for somebody to pick you. If you pick yourself instead of waiting to be picked, it's a big advantage in life, and it's a muscle. So the more you do it, the stronger you feel. So people say to me often, "You look really comfortable, and you've got some gravitas, and you've got some charisma, and this and that." That's not how I feel most of the time. I'm really insecure most of the time, or insecure. I've got my own fears and insecurities and self-consciousness. I just don't, I turn the volume in my head of those concerns way down, turn my commitment to some kind of future that I want, or connection with these people that are there. I turn that volume way up, and I follow that.
I think I definitely know what you're talking about, just because I see myself doing a lot of what you do, and kind of what you were talking about with the story of the baseball. I think when I hear that, I see a leader who allows them to take control, and then when they're doing bad, to be able to step up. And I think a lot of great leaders inherent that. And what my question would be from that would be, are great leaders allowing, if I'm at, like, are they allowing for them to be able to be out of there until they make a mistake, and then come in when they say, "Hey, like, you're not doing very good. Let me help you. I'll be there. I'll be there to kind of a person to lean on." And so I think that's definitely a great thing for all leaders, and especially for me, is to be there when something bad is happening, to be able to lean on them, or for them to lean on you when something bad is happening. And so how can you use that to encourage risk taking, especially when you're in a workplace, and especially if you're talking about like a family or outside of the workplace? How do you encourage risk taking from that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. I would say that if I'm somewhere where I'm not the quote unquote leader,
Hmm.
then I want to be the most energetic, excited person that's there. So most people don't do that. They sit back. They don't want to stand out from the crowd. This is a theme in our conversation today. They don't want to stand out in the crowd. They want to just wait and see what's socially acceptable. But the first person that kind of stands up and decides that this matters, and if I decide that, then I'm going to really fully participate. That sets the bar for the rest of the group. And there's always, I mean, those are like, if you think about a bell curve, like there's always those on the front end. There's a small amount, but that are setting the pace for the rest. I mean, you're a long distance runner, so this might work out for you metaphorically. But it's always just one person that decides to pick up the pace by whatever, 15 seconds a mile. That
Yeah.
everybody else has to respond to that. Either they create two groups or they, pick themselves up and go faster. Same thing socially. If I decide to be seen, stand out from the crowd, I mean, I like what you're saying in the sense that if somebody else is leading, it's not my group, I can champion the shit out of the leader, which is what you ought to do, is when the leader's doing something great, point it out and talk about it, not only to that person, but also to the group and say, wow, isn't he doing great? Or isn't she doing great? Like someone that does that, like really encourages in private, one-on-one, and public in the group. And then if there's something that's not going well, then you want to correct that in private, meaning one-on-one with a person. You never talk shit about anybody. If you're somebody that gossips, you're not to be trusted. So never gossip about somebody. Always talk to people, not about people. So, but it's good to go, and you'll build trust if you come alongside of a leader and say, "Hey, man, I don't think this is going very well." And then say, "How can I help?" That's
Yes.
so. To your question about risk, to be noticed is to take a risk. So those are ways to go be noticed. And if you notice behavior in the group that doesn't contribute, that's not going to contribute to the overall goal, you can be a spokesperson for ethics, for what's best for the group. And so, I mean, I just said gossip, so let's use that as an example. If something's not going well and the group starts mumbling to itself about somebody that's not there, you can either at least leave the room, like not participate in it. Because if you're there and you act like it's okay, then you're actually just as bad as the people that are doing it. So at
That's
least
true.
leave the room. More importantly, it's to stand up and say what's right and say what's good. Like, for example, if someone's gossiping about someone, I often ask them, have you talked to them about that? And usually the answer is no. And I would just say, hey, you mind doing that? Because, hey, we've got a whole thing we're doing here. So if we start to pull away from the leader, this is not going to go well. So, and if you put anybody on blast like that, they're pretty much going to correct their behavior, or they'll talk shit about you, which is fine too. You'll find that that's a group you don't want to be a part of. That's
So
it, man.
for you, you say to encourage a lot of people. Is there a difference between encourage and inspire?
Probably. Let's see. Well, what comes to me first is inspiration has a really short shelf life. It doesn't last very long. It's an emotion, and it's usually in the head, right? Like I get a new idea, like I'm inspired, I get some kind of new idea. Encouragement is actually the root of it etymologically is la cour, is French for the heart. So it's closer to the person. So when you speak into somebody and you notice something about them maybe other people haven't noticed, and you put language to it and you can affirm something about them, man, that's like wind in people's sails. So it's always a lot deeper if you deeply encourage someone and speak to their heart versus just their head. And you need to be able to do both. I mean, I coach founders of companies all day long. It's a lot of heady conversations, a lot of strategic conversations, big picture ideas, connecting the dots for people. But at the end of the day, my job is to promote courage in them. So that's why I will encourage them, is I'm just going to promote them to be courageous. That's the best type of encouragement, is not only just to point something out. It's beyond that. It's actually to call greatness out of them, summon their capacity to the surface. That's what great encouragement does. It encourages people into action. If they're into action, they're going to shift, they're going to transform instead of just into their mind, into ideas.
So what are you trying to encourage on them?
Them to, big picture, them to fully express themselves. Like, get real. Like, say what's there for you. That's a lot. It takes a lot of courage to speak what's true for you. Also, then to take action, like you used the word risk earlier, for them to take some kind of risk, whatever that might
Mhm.
be. It might be something simple. It might be something very complex. Maybe they're going to start a new company or something that's very complex. But even something simple as, with one of my leaders, for example, there might be a challenge with somebody on the team. Then they've been tolerating that for about 6 months instead of speaking to it, and them to go have the conversation, or do something creative, try something new. So whatever's there, but it really goes in that big category of like full self-expression. We're used to people trying to spend their lives trying to fit in and not to lose. And encouraging somebody really promotes them living in such a way that they go play to win. That's a very different mindset, to play to win versus playing not to lose.
So we talked a lot about what people like to do, and I just want to kind of go what people don't like to do, and that's having a difficult conversation. So how would you go about having a difficult conversation with somebody?
Well, there's a whole process that I think through and I have clients think through. And not to belabor it too much, but I would think about, okay, what's the main issue that I have with this person? What's the main issue? And then I think about what are 3 or 4 examples of this main issue. So, right, and then I write all this down. What are some major examples of that? Like very like tactical, like specific examples. That's step 2. Step 3 is to write down what's going to happen if we don't change these issues. What's going to happen if we don't change these issues, if they stay the way they are today, if that person doesn't change or the situation doesn't change, how bad's it going to get? That's good to write down. That's step 3. Step 4 is to, how have I contributed to it being as bad as it is? So most people will skip this step because they think I have a problem, I have a problem with you and you need to change. No, I need to think about how have I contributed to the problem. And that's step 4. Step 5 is talk about ideal outcome. What do you want with the whole situation? What do you want? Like, what do I want? If I'm engaging with you in this situation, what do I want for our dynamic? Or let's say we have a working relationship. What do I want from that? And then the last step is committing to action. So that's a whole process we work with people through. So I think about all that before I get in the conversation. Most people will avoid conflict and then have the conflict very irresponsibly. I won't have thought through it. I won't have entertained all different angles of it and thought through it and very thoroughly. So I'm not prepared for the convo. But I would do answer all those questions with myself privately before I start a conversation with anybody.
That's definitely good, because I think, first of all, difficult conversations is hard enough, but I think adding yourself into that makes it even harder for people, just because people always think it's other people's fault and it's never their fault. And so adding yourself to be like, hey, this is what I've done, how did I contribute to it, and how do I help it? And so my one of the last questions I want to ask for you are, with the people that you train and the people that's on your team, what do you think that most leaders lack?
Good question. What do most leaders lack? I would say most leaders lack, there's like 6 or 7 things that come to mind, but I'm trying to think most. Most of us don't take the time to get impactful feedback, I would say. Like, so they're disconnected from their impact. We all have a view of ourselves. It's usually pretty self-flattering, right? I think well of myself. I think that you like me. I think blah, blah, blah. But I don't stop and ask how things are really going. I remember one of my initial coaching clients, this is like a dozen years ago, and I asked him a simple question that he still brings it up every time I see him.
Mm-hmm.
That early, I just said, "What's it?" His name was Drew. I said, "Drew, what's it like for people to work for you?" And he hadn't thought about that before, and it really cracked his world open because he hadn't considered it. And he all of a sudden had deep compassion for people that were on his team because he realized he's in some ways a maniac. He's not very predictable. He is very, off the seat of his pants, kind of creative, all that. But the experience of people working for him is that they didn't know where he was going. They didn't know if he was going to stick with any idea. They didn't trust him very much, all these things. And so he went out and got a lot of feedback, and he realized that his assumptions about himself were actually not right. He actually, the opposite side. People responded and reacted to his negative character traits versus just focused on all of his positive character traits, which is what he was focused on. So most of us are not getting real-time feedback. But if you want to grow trust on a team, then be the most open and most committed to your own transformation. If you do those things, like if you're committed to your own transformation, you have to get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to get connected to what's happening in current reality, not just kind of some glorious view of yourself. So if you stand like that and go have those conversations often, people are going to trust you, and people follow people they trust.
Well, why is trust important?
Well, it's everything. I mean, it's the number one gamble for Homo sapiens, for people. Wow. Yeah, it's a great question. Why is trust important? Because it's the context of everything we do. Meaning, when you and I connected online, I asked you a few questions. You answered, I thought, really honestly, and I thought, I trust this guy. I'll jump on this call. I'll go do this. Why? Because I believed you. So if I believe someone, then I'll get close to them. And if I don't believe them, I won't get close to them. So that's why trust is important, is that it generates intimacy. It generates connection. It generates group sacrifice. Like we're both, you're giving of your time to interview me based on your trust in me, based on what you saw online or something. I'm investing this time on you, and your future, and the fact that the world needs more 20-year-old podcasters. And if I can be part of that story and make a difference and make a contribution, that'll feel good. I'm happy about that. So trust is the context of intimacy, and intimacy is what everybody wants, but yet we're all scared of.
Well, just ending this off, I just want to say thank you for even coming on here, because, I mean, honestly, you have to trust me to get here. But for the closer, I just want to know, like, your best books for leadership, and then kind of what do you do in your business?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the second one first. So I have a leadership coaching and training consultancy company called Take New Ground. We work with fast-moving founders and enterprise clients and help them generate brand new results, get something done they think's impossible. So most of that ends up working interpersonally with teams and leaders, and helping a leader lead themselves impeccably and then lead their team. And if you do that really well, you're going to get great new results. That's a no-brainer. It's like a natural trickle-down effect. So 100% ownership, 100% responsibility, being really courageous and being committed to the truth. If you do those things, everything's going to work out. That's what I do professionally. What books do I suggest? I'll suggest one, just because people probably aren't going to read it anyway. But if I was in your shoes, the book is called.
Book I read already.
It can be?
It can't be a book I already read it, so you got to pick wisely.
How about this one? The Courage to be Disliked. Have you read that book?
I've not read that one.
There you go. The Courage to be Disliked. It's not really about that. That's the kind of the bombastic, kind of interesting title. It's not really about that. It's a story. It's an allegory. So it's like a narrative story over time of this old philosopher and this young man. The young man's wrestling with how to view reality in a way that he has power, not like influence, more like energy. And versatility, so he can make choices, essentially. And it's a survey of, it does this juxtaposition between this kind of comparison between Freudian psychology and Adlerian psychology. So Freud, he did a great job at convincing the human race that we are the sum total of the past. And most psychology is connected to Freudian psychology, right? So that's why when you go to a therapist or counselor or something, they're going to ask you about your family of origin and where you came from and what that was like and how's that affecting you today. That's Freudian thinking. There's not a lot of power in that at all. So I'm kind of stuck dealing with my past, if I think about it that way, or dealing with my own previous versions of myself as well. That's what Freud convinced us to do. There's not a lot of power there. They call it etiological view, like cause and effect. I am the effect. Something else is the cause. Adler said, I am my future. So I am what I'm committed to. So what I think about the future generates how I show up now, which is as true, if not more true, than Freud. And there's a lot more power there because I can at any moment pick a new aim. I could pick my aim, and then if I pick an aim, then all my concerns trickle off of that aim. And so I see the world in a way that, like, this decision, this action is either a resource for the future I want or it pulls away from. It's a deterrent from the future I want. And then I get to make that choice. So it's a really great, easy read. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked. A couple Japanese guys wrote it, Koga and Kashimi, maybe. But if you just type in The Courage to Be Disliked, you'll hear it. And everybody, man, if I was 20, I read that book, man, it would have lit me on fire. So
I definitely would. I definitely would read it.
Check that book out, man. The Courage to Be Disliked.
All right. So I just want to say thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.